Hello and welcome back to the There is a Floodlight That Never Goes Out podcast. As always, I am joined by Will and Ed. How are we, lads?
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, I'm very good, thanks.
Good stuff. In today's podcast, we are, of course, going to be previewing the Championship playoffs. And I, for one, cannot wait, whilst also at the same time, I'm absolutely shitting myself. In the lead up to the games. So basically, we are going to be previewing the Barnsley versus Swansea and Brentford versus Bournemouth ties. We're not going to do anything, let's say, around a hypothetical playoff final just yet until that is confirmed, and we will do so at the time. Kicking it off then, I've got to start at Dean Court, where Bournemouth are taking on Brentford in the first game of the Championship playoffs. Ed, how do you see this one panning out? And first, I've got to put the question to you. Are Brentford, the serial bottlers, going to bottle it at their 13th attempt to a playoff victory?
Well, it's a weird one, this one, because if you'd asked me, a few games ago when Bournemouth were the informed team, you'd have thought, they were the team to beat in the playoffs. However, three straight losses they've had, including one against Brentford, and that doesn't sow any sort of seeds of positivity going into a campaign in the playoffs. And I'm a firm believer that you need momentum going to playoffs. That's why I don't really like teams sort of resting players in the last few games when they know their position in the playoffs is safe. And then obviously you've got a Brentford side who are bang in form, with some great wins against Bournemouth and Watford. And won the last four. So you're thinking they're going in the best possible steam. And that for me is why I do see Brentford coming out on top on this one.
Well, quick to jump the gun in terms of the prediction on that one. We've got to. I'm going to pose this question to you, Will. Looking at Bournemouth, a few games ago, we were saying on the podcast, this is the Red Hot Chili Cherries. I think we, in fact, named one of the podcasts just because of how good they were.
Yep.
And you were looking at Philip Billing in the number 10 role, Arnaud Danjuma, for me especially, who was probably the best player in the league at the time. Why do you think they've fallen off so much in the lead up to these playoffs?
I guess it's just that sort of typical. I don't want to say the place was safe, but they were pretty much there. And I guess it's when in the mindset going into a game, you're not thinking we have to win this. There's perhaps room for error. We saw that a bit with Barnsley, with our disappointing results against like Preston and Coventry. So I think it's partly to do with the mental side of it. But I think this game in general, it's two teams who we've seen so many different sides to in one season. And it's really going to be, the playoffs anyway are a case of what team rocks up. And I think this game especially is going to be simply, who turns up on the day.
Yeah, 100%. But we've got to look at it sort of more in focusing first leg. I'm seeing a lot of people sort of in the EFL stratosphere, as you could put it, sort of saying of the two legs, this is probably going to be the most high goal scoring tie. Ed, what would you say to someone who says that?
I would say they're probably exactly right in a normal league fixture. However, when it comes to the playoffs, I think all sort of normality goes out the window. I'm certainly looking to going back to when we were in the playoffs in the 16-17 season when we played Huddersfield in the first leg at the John Smith Stadium, and it was 0-0. And we didn't take the game to Huddersfield, and Huddersfield didn't take the game to us. Now, the rest of that playoff campaign is completely irrelevant and won't be touched upon. But I think there's a danger here with both these sides, especially from Bournemouth under Jonathan Woodgate, to revert back to tactics that are a little bit conservative and don't allow the players like Danjuma to really. Brentford won both games in the league this season, both by 1 goal margins. So there isn't on paper anything really between these two sides that we can all agree upon. I actually think that the Barnsley Swansea game will have more goals in it in the first leg.
Right, we can get onto that. We can get onto that.
I just see these two sides balancing each other out. And I see the idea of a neutral first leg, take it all into the second leg, much more so than, say, a Barnsley Swansea, because, and I'm not going to go too much into detail now on Barnsley Swansea, because I'll go into that more at a later date in the podcast.
Yeah.
But there's a certain, I'm going to say not maturity, but there's a certain experience to both Brentford and Bournemouth that perhaps Barnsley, the Tykes, don't really have. And therefore they know, Brentford were in this position last season, and Bournemouth have been in this situation before, played in much more high-profile games, a lot of those players. So, I just think there'll be that sort of tendency to sit back in those 50-50s rather than go straight for it. But yeah, I hope we don't see that because, like you said, both these sides, attack is their main strength. And that's my worry, is that they'll just cancel each other out.
Yeah. You mentioned the 2 victories for Brentford in the normal season. Will, how much importance do you place upon the fact that Brentford only a few weeks ago went to Dean Court and with 10 men dominated Bournemouth?
Yeah, that is going to be a massive part, because both teams are going to know that in their head that happened. And, from a Brentford point of view, they're thinking, we can do these over again. And from a Bournemouth point of view, they're thinking, well, we got dominated by these when they only had 10 men. Clearly that's going to be a factor that does play a part. Yes, it's a different game, but, you're not just going to forget those sort of results. And sort of saying what Ed, touched on about the experience. Obviously, Brentford, I think I'm right in saying they lost their first leg last year in the playoffs, 1-0. And they knew that going into that second leg, there was a lot more added pressure that they would have rather not had. And so I reckon they'll do everything they can to make sure that they're going into the second leg in a much more comfortable position than last time. Because, they played Swansea last time, who were a good side. But this Bournemouth team, I can see, if they get ahead, they've got the quality to hold a result, and they're not going to bottle it in the second leg. So I think the first leg is massive in this game.
Yeah. Ed, you mentioned a little bit previous to Will that you can see the 2 sides cancelling each other out. Now, you look at Brentford's system, and it changed mid-season, didn't it? And we saw the advent of a 5 at the back almost, with Pontus Jansson on the right, Ethan Pinnock on the left, the sort of the sweeper of Norgard, and then Kanyos at left wing back, and Roslev at right wing back. How much importance do you place on that? Because Brentford at times this season, unless Ivan Toney turns up, they've struggled for goals.
Yeah, I mean, you knew how Brentford was set up, that 4-3-3. Very rarely changed. Now, with a changing system, we've seen teams be successful at this season. Look at Watford when they changed the system after the injury to Deeney. So I don't think a change of system is a bad thing, and it certainly hasn't served Brentford badly at all, because there was that element of everyone knew what a Thomas Frank team was nowadays. After a prolonged spell as a permanent manager, and it needed that bit of freshening up. And like I said about Toney, this is a chance for Toney to not only make headlines in the Championship, but make headlines on a national scene. Because let's face it, this is when the Premier League fans start casting an eye upon the Championship for the playoff campaigns. They're going to have heard everything about Toney, but very rarely seen it with their own eyes. So if he wants to really push into the minds of the top 6 fans, the Premier League fans, like he should be, like he deserves to be, this is his chance to take.
Yeah. You mentioned everyone knew what to expect from a Thomas Frank side. Talking of head coaches / managers, we have to talk about Jonathan Woodgate. Now, I've seen this mentioned on other podcasts. I've seen it mentioned on Twitter a million times. But the 4 managers / head coaches in the playoffs, we know what we're getting from them. In Valerian Ismail at Barnsley, you're getting a manager who got 76 points from 40 games in charge of the Reds, and that is pretty outstanding. In Steve Cooper, you've now got a gaffer who's led Swansea to 2 consecutive playoff campaigns where they hadn't been before. And in Thomas Frank, once again, he's delivered a playoff place for Brentford whilst they threatened to make a top 2 charge again this season. Whereas Woodgate, he didn't do a great job at Borough. He landed on his feet definitely at the Cherries, and this sort of the surge of form under him's really tailed off. Now, going into a playoff campaign, will the lack of experience and maybe lack of know-how in a big game affect Bournemouth in the sense of their head coach?
It's a difficult one with Woodgate because, myself included, when he was brought into the Bournemouth job, I don't think there was many fans who thought that's the right move. It just seemed so not right in a way. And yet, to be fair to him, he silenced the critics and, he has got Bournemouth securely into the playoffs, which I guess was probably their goal, once automatic promotion was out the window. So I understand what you're saying in the sort of lack of experience going into the playoff campaign. But again, I think, he's already proved us wrong once in what he was going to do with that Bournemouth team. And there's nothing stopping him from going into this playoff campaign and sort of silencing everyone again and, putting this Bournemouth team in a really good position to go on and win their two legs. But no, I think sometimes the element of surprise, I guess, with a manager can be a good thing. Like you say, with Ishmael and stuff, you do know what you're getting, the type of football, you know. Whereas with Woodman, maybe it is a bit of a wild card and harder to read from a Brentford perspective.
Yeah, I think there is certainly a little bit of that. Ed, what do you make to Woodgate?
I agree with what Will said about that sort of air of suspicion when he first came in. I think you did him quite kindly, Tom, by saying he didn't do very well at Borough. He was shocking. He was shit. Let's call it what it was. And I think if you're Jonathan Woodgate, you're thinking, right, well, I had a good spell Borough lower down the club, the youth teams, and then I got my chance and I didn't really take it, and people knew that I didn't take it, and so if I want to be employed as a manager in the future, this is my chance to prove to everyone that I'm a good manager, head coach, whatever you want to call it. And he's very lucky to be in this position. He's got a chance to get a Premier League promotion on his CV, which if you'd have told Borough fans a year ago, they'd have laughed you all the way to the bank. So I think it's really is a chance for him to propel his career, even if it's just a big money move to somewhere and then he gets found out. I'm not saying he will get found out because I don't think we've seen enough of Woodgate to pass judgment on his qualities as a head coach yet. I think you've got to give him full credit for the way he's galvanised that Bournemouth side. I really do. I think there's almost a case with this Bournemouth side in Woodgate of sort of Ollie syndrome, if you're going to call it that. So when the team does well, when they get a win, it's the team doing well. When they lose, it's the manager's fault. And I see that sort of parallels with this Bournemouth side and Woodgate, and I don't like that. And I think he deserves full credit. We've touched it before, the drop-off of form. But this is a man who's played for Real Madrid.
Not very well.
Not very well, but I don't think things can go as badly as his debut, but for Real Madrid. But famous last words. No, I just think he's in a very lucky position. He'll know that. He'll know this is his chance to seize, and I think with the players at disposal, I don't see any reason why he can't succeed. Personally.
Yeah, Ed, that's definitely fair enough. Will, starting off sort of then with the first leg of these fixtures, how do you see this one going?
As we've said, it's a very difficult one to call. But the first leg, for some reason, I just see a Bournemouth victory. Sort of a very close, tactical game, sort of similar to the when Bournemouth played Watford at home a few weeks ago. That sort of that, just one crucial goal in it, and I just see it playing out similar to that for some reason. With Dan Zuma popping up with a beauty or something like that. So I'll go for a 1-0 Bournemouth win in the first leg.
Yeah, Like we've said previous, we know, Ed, that you think Brentford will win the tie, but how do you see the first leg going?
Either a 0-0 or a 1-1 draw. I don't see either side really coming out on top. Going into the second leg with a lead. So yeah, and then we'll go to the Brentford Community Stadium, and I think Brentford will, pop a couple past them. There might be the late goal from Bournemouth to give it a bit of spice, but all in vain.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. First leg, I'm in agreement with Will. I see the Cherries doing a number on Thomas Frank's men to the tune of 2-0. And second leg, I see Bournemouth just sitting back, getting a 0-0 draw. So I see Bournemouth in the playoff final. Will, how do you see the second leg going?
Yeah, I agree with you. Perhaps not a 0-0 or anything. I can see Brentford coming out to play after being 1-0 down in the first leg. And I think we'll just see Bournemouth sort of be able to cope with that. And then, Bournemouth can look so, deadly on that counter-attack with the pace they've got up front. And yeah, I can see Bournemouth maybe putting another couple past them. And yeah, again, I see Bournemouth going through to the final.
Good stuff then. So we've got me, Bournemouth, Will, Bournemouth, Ed, Brentford. Moving on then to, come on guys, let's face it, the most important game of football played since the year 2000. It is, of course, Barnsley versus Swansea City. I can already see the faces that Ed's pulling. I know you're not going to like this, Ed, but previewing Barnsley versus Swansea is difficult for me and Will because we don't want to curse anything. And we certainly don't want to stick his necks out and then be made to look like a pillock whilst also having to sort of cope with the fact that Barnsley have lost. If that does unfortunately happen. So I'm going to let Ed sort of take the reins on this one. But before I do, Ed, how do you see the first leg faring?
Yeah, so I touched upon it earlier that I see this first leg being a lot more entertaining than the other game. And I think that comes down to both your styles of play and also your inexperience at this sort of pressure level. And that's not just for the squad, but also the manager. This will be Ishmael's first playoff campaign, be Steve Cooper's second. And, we know Barnsley love a policy of signing virtually all under 25 players. And, with that comes a lack of experience, which might in games like this be missing. I think your direct attacking style of play, it suits itself to being exploited in these kind of games, which, if we're going off past form, you haven't beaten Swansea on the last 4 occasions. Swansea have picked up 2 wins and 2 draws in that time. They are slightly semi-obsessed with you, which is a little weird. I remember, there were a lot of sort of Jacks fans in the comments of Barnsley FC's Twitter once they beat you this season. A little bit weird, a little bit tin pot, but that is Swansea for you. I think I just think Barnsley will go into this game with this, and this I don't disrespect them at all for this, but with an openness to their play that I think the nous and the experience of Swansea could exploit. I also think it's clear for me to state on record that I want Barnsley to lose this game of football, as I want them to lose the reverse fixture. As nice as it is to see South Yorkshire clubs succeed, this would be a succeeding.
Don't lie with that trope. I know Adam. Adam Oxley said it's nice to see him doing well. That trope is real
for your Doncasters and your Rotherhams of this world. You know what I mean? Communities where, football really is the lifeblood of their community, and it is the same for Barnsley. But the problem with Barnsley is that you guys support them, so therefore, I don't want them to do well. So no, I just think. Oh, I'm very honest. Also, Barnsley, neither of you come into this in amazing form. I think that's also worth pointing out. You won 2 out of your last 5. Swans only 1, and that was against Derby County, which isn't an achievement really. Swansea had a bit of an identity crisis. Pardon?
You'd have beaten him, you'd have stayed up.
Yeah, we don't need to go into that one too much.
Oh dear.
No, I think on Swansea, they've had a little bit of an identity crisis this season at times, certainly the second half of the campaign.
Yeah.
They've struggled up front for goals, and that's what I think will save you. However, they've got one man, in Andre Ayew, who is a definition of a game changer, you know. And these are the games, don't forget, these are the games that he sort of thrives in, and that's a problem for the Reds. But I guess once they've got Daryl DK and then Carlton Morris to come off the bench, that's always a danger in its own right. I mean, I'm going to touch upon this for you guys. I said off there that this is a bit of a, free hit, if you like, this playoff campaign, because, he's talking about your nerves, asking me how I went through 2 campaigns this in 2 seasons in a row, with depression after each one, is how we answer that one, with extreme sadness. But no. So I think it's a free hit, but you guys disagree.
Absolutely.
Just elaborate as to why you disagree.
I think me and Will agree pretty much unanimously on this. This is, well, it's just a fact this is by far the best season Barnsley have had in 21 years. And if you discount the 1997-98 season and the 99-2000 season, it's the best season we've had ever. And it's an odd position to be in, because this time last year, as everybody knows, it's part of Sky Commentator Bingo these days, we were one kick off being in League One. And as a Barnsley fan, I think you're always pretty happy to be mid-table Championship. And it's not something I've ever seen us be. Since pretty much I was born, we've been a struggling Championship side, upper echelons League One side. And for someone to say it's a free hit for Barnsley, it just isn't. These opportunities don't often come around for the Reds, and to treat it as a free hit and go, well, if we lose in the semi-final, then so be it. I don't think you can do that. Our squad's going to be torn apart if we lose. That is just something I've accepted. The likes of Mikael Hellick, Mess Anderson, Callum Stiles, Callum Britton, Collie Woodrow, Daryl DK, Alex Mower are all going to leave the club pretty much if we don't get promoted. And sadly, I can see Valerian Ismail picking up a better job than Barnsley if we don't get promoted. That's pretty much the reason why I don't think it's a free hit. I mean, what about you, Will?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's this idea that, Ed, you spoke about having 2 consecutive playoff campaigns. That will not happen to Barnsley, because that's just not the sort of club we are. It takes a miracle run to get into this position. And I think some people think this one season could be a turning point for us. And I think it will be, in the fact of it might have got us out of that yo-yo trap, but I still don't think it makes the playoff team. I think it makes us a mid-table team who've had a very good run. And like Tom said, it's the fact that this squad, there's already so much talk around it, and it will be torn apart if we don't get promoted, because, we just don't have the money, etc., to hold these sort of players. So I think, at the end of the day, we're talking about a playoff campaign in the Championship, 3 games away from the Premier League. So to treat it as just we'll give this a go, is the completely wrong attitude. I think, you go into that attitude when you're playing Chelsea in the 3rd round of the FA Cup. This is a free hit, because it doesn't matter really. Whereas these games, these are massive. And we know we're capable of winning these games, and so why would you treat it as a free hit? If you're capable of winning, then you should go in with the attitude of wanting to win, and anything that isn't winning is a failure.
Yeah, I mean, I want to sort of define what I class as a free hit. It's not from this sort of laissez-faire, whatever will be attitude. It's from a sort of, if you lose this game, it's not the end of the world. And I'll elaborate as to why I believe that. You're not a sort of a parachute payment team where you've spent big, you get into your sort of last chances before it all goes tits up. You're not in that financial situation. I also think this season, as cringe as it sounds, has been about the journey, not the end product. Because I'll tell you what the journey's done from an outsider. It's put Barnsley FC in a position where you can go out and sign some of the best top young talent in the country and on the continent, and people know you have a trusted and successful method of developing these players. Because you've now done that over 2 or 3 seasons, and now got an end reward, a playoff place in the Championship. And the players you talked about leaving, so Mo is out of contract. I agree with you on him. He will leave if you don't get promoted. Daryl DK, he was bound to have suits in the Premier League.
Too good for us even if we go up. Let's face it.
I see Callum Britton staying. I see Collie Woodrow staying. I even see Callum Stiles staying for another season. These players, because a lot of that depends on Ishmael's future of the club. I believe that as well. But I don't think Ishmael, from what I've seen of him, is the kind of guy to sort of leave the club, walk away from a challenge unfinished. So I wouldn't actually be too worried about losing Ishmael, because I think you've also got to look at clubs around who's in a position where they'll be looking to either offload the manager or have offloaded the manager, and will be looking to bring in an Ishmael. Palace, they're heavily interested in Sean Dyche, which is stupid in my opinion. But
Burnley, though.
Burnley, but I mean, I think Burnley are a little bit Barnsley-esque. They're sort of the Premier League Barnsley.
They are.
I think he'd suit Burnley, but again, I just wouldn't be too worried about that. And I don't think you should be thinking about that. You should be focusing on your campaign now, and then whatever will be in that aspect. But in terms of will this singular game or 3 games define you as a club for the next 10 years? I'm not sure it will do as much as you guys believe. I really don't, because I think this season has laid the groundwork for season upon season of success. Now, if you continue with this model, you're doing what you did. We've talked so many times. You're doing what Brentford have done and building that reputation. Well, you've got that reputation now. You just need to act upon it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love that to be the case.
Yep.
Yeah,
but
it really is just that fact that you're looking at it from a Sheffield Wednesday point of view, and probably not just as a Wednesday point of view, but of a Championship point of view, in seeing, Brentford have taken this path before, Norwich took this path a few years ago, whereas it might be that case, but I'm a Barnsley fan, and I've seen us be dog shit for 12 years, and, when you're there and you see Laurie Della Valle score off his hip for Crewe Alexandra as they descended to the bottom of League One, it's hard not to be stressed going into a Championship playoff campaign. But going more onto the game itself, you mentioned about how the Swans beat us in the regular season. That's not something I'm actually too worried about, because as Valerian Ismail's mentioned in his press conference, he says, we were a team that didn't have Daryl DK and Carlton Morrison, and it makes us a completely different animal, in my opinion, now having them two. I'm going to throw this to Will, but it just, every time Carlton Morris picks that ball up on the left wing, he looks like he's going to do something with it. And it's something we didn't have from our attack in the first half of this season. I mean, would you agree with me on that, Will?
Massively. It's, these 2 games that we're going to see, if anything, are 2 different teams to what we saw in the season. I think Swansea have changed as a team. We played them where they couldn't stop winning. They weren't necessarily a special team. They had the knack of winning, which, sometimes all it takes. I think they might have lost that a little bit. Like Ed said, 1 win in the last 5 coming into this. Jamal Lowe still scoring, but, not as frequently as he once was. So, yeah, it's very hard to call. Like you say, with the additions of Daryl DK, Carlton Morris, they have been so important for Barnsley and the way we now play. So obviously they'll have an impact. And I think, you've got 2 teams. You're going to have one team who are playing with the experience, with the likes of Andre Ayew, and then you're going to have this kind of naiveness, but also sort of desire from this young Barnsley team who are just hungry for wins. And in a way, I think the almost lack of understanding how big this game is could play into our hands a little bit, in the fact of these Swansea players, they've been there before, they know how much pressure's on them for a club who expect to be doing well, whereas Barnsley, they go in with the attitude of, it's just another game, which we so often do, take it one by one. I think, I don't know. I really don't know. It's so hard to say. I'm shitting myself. It's just, yeah, I don't think I've ever wanted Barnsley to win 2 games more in my life. Because it's one of them, I'm more bothered about the semis than the actual final, because in the final I genuinely do believe everything goes out the window and it's just a game of football and there's going to be a winner and a loser. Whereas the semis, I think there is a lot of different aspects going into it. And yeah, just please, come on, Barnsley.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hope the Reds.
Yeah, I don't think there's much more to add on the Barnsley front, to be honest. I mean, there's different things that I mean you can mention in our defence, for example. You've got the conundrum of who do you play at right centre half? Do you go Michael Solbauer? Do you go Toby Sibic?
Well, I'll ask you, Tom. Who are you going for?
Personally, I'm going Sibic, just to deal with the pace of Jamal Lowe and Andre Ayew, because I'm not knocking Michael Solbauer, and I'm not even saying he's slow. I just don't think he has the correct attributes to counter them two. And we saw it at Oakwell in the regular season game. I said I don't place too much importance on that, but it's definitely an aspect I'd have to pick up on in that game. It was Swansea didn't play well, but their only avenue into goal scoring opportunities was round the back of Solbauer, and it's just not something I think we can risk. Maybe even in the second leg, it might be a case of we see some minutes for Liam Kitchen.
I was going to say
at left centre half and moving Ness to right centre half. Yeah, but we'll have to wait and see on team selection front, and then of course you can pretty much guarantee who's going to be playing in the other positions. You're going to have Britton at right wing back, Stylesy left wing back, Palmer and Mowatt as your midfield two, and well, it could be anyone of 6 as your forward 6, but I'm in agreement with Doug O'Kane of the Chronicle. He said first leg you can see it being a DK, Woodrow, Morris front 3. Second leg you can see it being a Woodrow, Chaplin, and then one of Morris or Adebayo front 3. But we'll have to wait and see on the Barnes front. Swansea front then. Ed, how do you see this for the Swans? Because they are 17th in the form table, I think, over the last 15 matches, which is a far cry from how good they were at the top for the first 6 months of the season. Going into a playoff campaign, how key do you think it is that the Swans aren't in the best of form?
I think it's a sliding scale at the minute. I don't think it's actually anything to worry about for Swansea. Had they lost, let's say, the last 5 going into it, of course, that question marks have to be raised. But the fact of the matter is we've talked about it so many times already, that form really does go out the window in these sort of games, and you isolate these games as separate entities, which is what they are. So I don't think that's much of an issue. Swansea will know they've got it in them, just as Barnsley will know they've got it in them. There's a reason both of them are here at this point in the season. I really think Swansea have got to take this game to Barnsley, though. I think if they sit back and allow Barnsley to get on the front foot quickly and early, that's just going to set the tempo for the whole game. And, Barnsley will, I'm not saying it'll be a rout, but I said, you'll come away with something from that first leg. I think Steve Cooper, like I say, he's been in this position before. Does that really aid him, though? I'm not sure it does, if we're being honest. Played Brentford last season in the playoffs, and I think Steve Cooper has enough in his tactical nous to if anyone's going to outsmart Valérien Ismaël out of the 3 remaining managers, I think Steve Cooper's the one. I think when you're tactically wise, I think he's superior to Frank and Woodgate, and we'll see that. My only worry for Swansea is scoring goals, because the second half of the season they haven't done that enough. We know they're very solid defensively. We know they've got a decent midfield. The likes of Grimes and Fulton. And then you come in, if Lowe and Ayew turn up, I think it'll be a real tough time for the Reds.
Yeah, definitely.
But at the same time, this, you mentioned Swansea's defence. They've not had a player like Daryl DK to deal with. And I know that sounds like I'm so up. But he's such a different type of player because he doesn't just bring quality. He's fucking huge and will just bash into you and be a right pain in the arse to defend against. And like, you know, playoffs, you're scared about making mistakes. The last thing you want is some big fella just knocking into you. You know, it would be the last thing you want, and I'm praying that makes a difference.
Yeah.
No, I think DK definitely has the ability to change this game and a tie more than any other Barnsley player. I just think the Swansea's defence has been that good enough and faced such a wide array of strikers this season. And this will be famous last words because DK will then go and bag a hat trick. But I just think
hope so.
I see them being able to counter it and stop it. You know, the three at the back is perfectly set up to sort of give them enough numbers in defence to stop a big man like DK.
Well, actually, this is something I need to ask you because we have seen sort of since you'd say probably February or March, Swansea have switched to a 4-3-3.
They are, yeah, they have.
Do you see them reverting back to the three at the back, as you said, then to try and cope with Barnsley? Because in my personal view, even without trying to jinx it, if Swansea start a four at the back, I think they could be seriously exposed.
I would go back to three at the back, and now that is taking all rationale out of the conversation because, you know, but I don't think this like this four at the back has been in particularly amazing at all. And you know, I can't believe I'm going to even bring this back up. I mean, I'm embarrassed, but this is my only sort of case example of how to beat Barnsley, and that was when we beat you and played a three at the back, and the three at the back perfectly sort of countered your direct attacking style. And I think if you're playing Barnsley, the last thing you want to do is leave Daryl DK or Carlton Morris with a one-on-one sort of duel, and with two centre backs, that's the danger. So personally, if I was Steve Cooper, I would take the risk and revert back to the three at the back, because then you can also take it back to five at the back if you need to set up shop. So, you know, it's got that flexibility. Do I see him doing that? No, I don't. But that's what I would do.
Yeah. Well, what were your thoughts on the 4/3 at the back?
I mean, like you said, Tom, I would much rather play against the four at the back because it just, you know, if their fullbacks start to push up, like you say, all of a sudden, if we get Britain Styles in behind like we want to, and all of a sudden you've got three men in the box, and that's where we've been so deadly, getting numbers in the box. But yeah, it's so hard to say, I think, because at the same time you've got to give our defence credit. I think they'll, on their day they can easily put up with Jamal Lowe and Ayew, in my opinion. Although they're great players, you know, Michal Helik, Mez Anderson, we've seen two unbelievable centre halves this season in those two. So yeah, it's going to be difficult, and I think from a Barnsley point of view, you know, our set piece has been important anyway, and I think in a game like this where if you are struggling in open play, to break down their defence, set pieces could be massive. You know, we've seen how effective we've been from corners and stuff, and you know we're gonna have to use them to our best advantage and try and, you know, if that's where the goal's gonna come from, then that's where it's gonna come from.
Yeah, you mentioned Barnsley's set piece prowess. 17 goals scored from set pieces this season, which quite frankly is ridiculous because I remember a time where you'd be sat next to me, Will. I'd say we've got a corner. We're not going to score.
Yeah.
It was always about beating the first man in. Yet we've deployed this system since DK came in of just crowd the goalkeeper, and I wouldn't be surprised if we scored it from a corner again. The sort of last thing I want to mention on an individual level about this game is the goalkeepers. Now, Brad Collins, we've seen how great he's been at sweeping for Barnsley the past few months, so I don't actually think there's any question marks about him. But if Freddie Woodman's in top form for the Swans, how difficult will it be for Barnsley to bag Ed?
Incredibly so. Just a second, touching on Collins, you're right, you can't drop him at all, but I don't actually think he's a very good goalkeeper. And
mate, honestly,
I haven't seen it.
I thought this for a while,
but both times we played, he was at fault for the goal we scored in the first
That was Walton.
Was that Walton?
Yeah.
Was that Chris or Jack? I can't remember which one's which.
Jack.
Well, in that case, I still think he's shit. No. The second leg, I guess the second leg then, which he did play in, and there were a couple of times he came out, missed the ball. He suits your style perfectly. I'm not saying drop him. I just think in high pressure games like this, if anyone's going to make a mistake in that Barnsley side, it's going to be Collins, just because the sheer amount of times he comes out to sweep it up. And 9 times out of 10, he'll do it perfectly. But that one time, he does have that clanger in him. As for Freddie Woodman, I put Tim Krul in the team this season. They'll be coming out later. I put him ahead of Freddie Woodman, but it's a very close second place for Woodman. I think he's been Swansea's star player this season, apart from Andre Ayew. And you'd be hard pushed to find a better shot stopper in the league, really.
Yeah. If I just touch on the goalkeepers, I think, Ed, you mentioned Collins perhaps having that clanger in him under pressure, and I'd maybe be inclined to disagree in the fact of I think Brad Collins is one of the coolest players on our team under pressure. I genuinely think he just he gives a shit, but he doesn't look like he gives a shit. He looks, he does look very calm under pressure. And while I understand, he has made some errors, I think when you look at the amount of times he's come out and played that sweeper role, you're bound to make some errors. We see errors at the very top of the goalkeeping game under the likes of Edison, who are literally the best in the world at that role. So, yes, okay, he's made 1 or 2 mistakes, but I think the amount of times he's done it, so effectively sort of counters that. And then with Woodman, I think Swansea having a good goalkeeper is very important for them we were speaking about set pieces. Often when we've been effective from set pieces is when the goalkeeper isn't great and they almost seem to be more bothered about the men stood around them than the ball. And I think with a keeper like Woodman, he's above that and he's wise enough to sort of ignore the players around him, and he would be a man who focuses on the ball and perhaps allow us to not be as effective from our corners where we try and overcrowd the keeper. I think he's the sort of keeper who could deal with that because he's shown this season how good he is. So on the goalkeeper front, I think we have got 2 very different but very good goalkeepers.
Yeah, 100%. Obviously, me and Will aren't going to do predictions for this one, and I know, Ed, this is more hope than actual sort of fact. But how can you see this playoff tie going?
I might shock you here, boys, but I actually see Barnsley getting to Wembley.
Don't say that, man.
There's 2 reasons I said that. Number 1, just to jinx you, just to be a twat. And number 2, it's a genuine belief. No, I don't see anything in this Swansea side, really, hand on heart, that I can say can counter Barnsley's style of play well enough to win a 2-legged fixture. I really don't. I think you match them every single area of the pitch and better them in quite a lot. And then in the final, I do see you losing to Brentford. But no, I think the first leg, like I said, I think it'll be a high scoring 2-2. We see, isn't it? It's weird, isn't it? In sort of these pressure games where it is like a winner takes all sort of environment, high scoring games. I mean, look at us versus Derby. That was a 3-3. And no one really talks about the fact that it was a 3-3. I mean, God knows how the quality was shite, but the facts of the scoreline remains. And in those sort of games, look at the Champions League, it's more a goal-by-goal basis. And I think that sort of will alter the style of play. There'll be a game of phases where you'll be on top, they'll be on top, and we'll see at the end who comes out to prevail. But I do think you'll win. Whether that be done and dusted in the first leg, I don't see it. I see maybe like I said, a 2-2, and then you'll go to the Liberty Stadium, and I think you'll win. I mean, one thing I do like about the Championship playoffs is that there is no, obviously, away goals. They don't count for anything special. So I think that's good. And also with the return of fans, I mean, that's just going to be brilliant to see. I don't know about you boys, but watching the FA Cup yesterday was just
It was
brilliant.
beautiful, wasn't it?
With the fans. It was very strategically done to make it look like there were a lot more fans in the stadium than there actually was.
To be fair to them, they made a decent noise. Like,
they did. Well, Leicester fans made.
Well, yeah, noise, Leicester fans. Fair, Leicester in general, like, so off topic, but big up Leicester. Just like in general, what a club.
Definitely, no. An advert for how clubs should be run and everything about that. But no, I can't wait to see fans back. I'm genuinely excited to watch tomorrow's game. Or Monday, whenever this goes out.
I don't know what I'm excited. I don't know. I'm excited. I'm nervous. I'm like, I don't know. I've never felt like this going into a Barnsley game. I don't think. Like, perhaps maybe the playoff final in League One, maybe, but maybe I don't think that was this bad. I mean, if we could have a remake of that playoff campaign, we scored 9 goals in 3 games. I think I'd take that.
Yeah, big time. I've got to say, lads, at the risk of maybe bragging here, when I walk up those steps and I'm back in Oakwell tomorrow, or today if you're listening on the Monday, it's just going to be emotional. Like, you don't go to Oakwell for like 14 months, and the last time I was there, we lost 2-0 to Cardiff City, and me and Will literally we were stood next to each other going, right, that's it, we're down, aren't we? And now we're 3 games off the Premier League. So I don't know how I'm going to cope. I'm probably going to have to get blackout drunk if I was to kill any emotion. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to remain sober, but I'm probably going to have a few panic attacks during them 90 plus minutes. But yeah, I just can't wait. I can't wait, but I'm so nervous.
I think the first leg is so. Sorry, go on.
So I'm sitting in the ultimate position of comfort.
Yeah.
What will be, and I get to watch some Barnsley fans get a little bit nervous. And if you do win this game, like I said, I'll only start getting nervous when you guys get to the final. Start thinking, hang on a minute, the ultimate embarrassment's about to happen here. But no, I can see why you're nervous. But I mean, you talked there about the reaction. I mean, that's for going back to Oakwell. I mean, imagine what all the other fans in slightly nicer stadiums are going to think.
Coming from a West,
you playing a tin shed. You playing a tin shed, yeah.
No. I think we can both unanimously agree that our stadiums are a little bit worse for wear and in need of a bit of TLC.
Disagree, mate. Oakwell's. I think Oakwell's actually quite nice.
I'd rather have Oakwell than the Brentford Community Stadium.
Yeah. I mean, when you go back, Ed, you're going to be playing. If you're about to buy a single ticket, you're paying 45 quid to watch League One football.
Yeah, well, it's all right, because Chansiri said he's learned from his mistakes. He's going to take the club forward, so hopefully he revises his ticket strategy. But I'm not all that much hope. But no, I think you guys just enjoy it. That's what I would say. You got, and it's a lot easier said than done. But especially going to the game, just savor it. Because very lucky position to be in.
I'd say one thing to finish on, to do with both games really. At what point in the first leg does the second leg become irrelevant? And let me explain a little bit. What I mean by that is, going back to Barnsley's playoff campaign 2016, we won the first leg 3-0. Going into that second leg, there wasn't a doubt in any fan's mind what was going to happen. Is that the same in the Championship?
No, nothing. Seriously, I think 4-0 is probably the benchmark for you to be sort of, okay, we might be all right. But even then, I wouldn't put it past the team. If Bournemouth beat Brentford 4-0, I'm not putting it past Brentford to beat Bournemouth 5-0. Yeah. So I just think it's magical. Is the playoffs, and this is probably my final word on it. Regardless of the result on Monday evening for Barnsley, definitely for Brentford and Bournemouth as well. I think for me, even if we lose 1-0 or 2-1 or 3-2, as long as going into the second leg, we've got a chance that if we go to that game and we perform well, we're going to be on the way to Wembley. I'll be delighted with the lads.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of them now. If we get humbled And this time next week, I'm talking about Barnsley losing 5-0 on aggregate. I'll be going, Ismail Art, I want him gone. I want him gone in morning. But just know now that as I sit here, I'm very proud of the players, and I just really hope we get to Wembley, into the promised land.
Yeah, completely echo Tom's words.
Final word from me. Up the Swans.
You're shy. Anyway, if you've listened to this point, we thank you very much. As always, it's really appreciated. If you're listening on YouTube, please drop in the comments who do you think is going to win the playoffs and win a place in the Premier League. If you are listening on YouTube, of course, please drop a like on the video and subscribe. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, do follow and subscribe. And as always, you can find us on Twitter at Floodlight Pod. Thanks for listening.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, guys.